Now, I don't know if anyone else has a similar memory, but I remember being told as a kid that when someone was being a bully, like by using words and name-calling, things like that, to say a really cliched and cringy phrase back at them, which was, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words would never hurt me." Anyone remember that from their childhood? Yeah? And also as a kid, when someone was mean or nasty in whatever way, and their parents caught them, they were told to go and apologize to the other person. And this would often be replied with a pouting "sorry," followed by the parents saying, "say it like you mean it." Anyone remember that? Yeah. And then the person would muster up something that sounded a little more like a genuine sorry. And after this, though, the kid who was being apologized to would be told by their parent to tell the other kid that you forgive them. And then that was that. So as we talk today on the subject of forgiveness, I remember these phrases that we were taught to say, and how none of what we were told to say, whether that cringy phrase, the reluctant apology, or that awkward dispensation of forgiveness, ever made any real sense, and certainly never made me or anyone else feel any better. The term we use to describe situations like this now is emotional bypass. A website I found describes emotional bypass as happening when we avoid or suppress our emotions rather than addressing them directly. Emotional bypass can happen when we don't allow ourselves to fully process negative emotions. Instead, we sweep them under the carpet or gloss over them. It can also occur when we use spiritual or psychological practices to avoid dealing with unresolved emotional issues. So when it comes to these old behaviors that become embedded into us, where we expect a simple apology to be met with words of "I forgive you," this emotionally bypasses the entirety of the hurt or the pain that we have experienced as a result of the wrongdoing. And for the person who caused the act, they may also be bypassing some of their own feelings of shame or something else, hiding behind a mask of fear or guilt that stops them from fully being able to live up to what happened. And to use the words of my grief and loss mentor, David Kessler, as human beings, we are hardwired to avoid pain. Doesn't matter if that's physical pain or emotional pain. So when we bypass the pain that we are feeling without it being witnessed, the pain doesn't go away. So we stuff it down by potentially seeking to numb it out in many ways, potentially using substances or alcohol or food or relationships or other behaviors. As I said, to numb us out or to give us a bigger dopamine hit. Seems to work for a short time, but it doesn't really get to the root of the hurt that we may be feeling. And so the hurt continues, and as we hurt, we suck our loved ones into the hurt too. There's a phrase that says, "hurt people." And so as we feel our emotional pain, we in effect begin to cause hurt to other people. And in the reading we had before this message began, there's another phrase that says from the book of Forgiving by Desmond and Mpotutu. In our own ways, we're all broken. Out of our brokenness, we hurt others. Forgiveness is the journey we take towards healing the broken parts. It's how we become whole again. So hurt people. So as we look at forgiveness and the implications that it can lead to us bypassing the complex emotions that we may be feeling related to the potential harm or pain that has been caused, it's important that we honor our experience and our story, and honor it in a way without the pain or the hurt defining us. Now, in his book, Radical Forgiveness by Colin Tipping, it says that forgiveness is about acknowledging our pain and choosing to release the grip that it has on us. It's a conscious decision to acknowledge the resentment and anger that we may be holding on to, rather than stuffing it down, and it allows us in turn to reclaim our power. When we've been hurt, it can become natural but really painful to harbor fear, anger, and resentment. Studies show that holding on to these negative emotions and not processing them can lead to a myriad of health issues, including stress, anxiety, and physical ailments like high blood pressure. Tipping emphasizes that our emotional pain is often linked to our unwillingness to forgive. By stuffing these past hurts down or by allowing them to dominate how we live, instead of facing them, we create a cycle of suffering that can become difficult to break. So forgiveness as radical includes the recognition that it is necessary for us to get in touch with our feelings, not out of blame, not to intellectualize them or simply talk about them, but actually feel them. Now, this can be especially challenging as sometimes we fear the vulnerability that this may create in us. Or we've held ourselves together for so long that we may worry about what will happen if we allow ourselves to really feel these feelings. I mean, are we going to explode? Are we ever going to be able to stop crying again? You know, whether those feelings are mad, glad, sad, or afraid. And next, learning how to accept these feelings as a part of us. We don't need to continue living into the resentment of that pain or that fear. But we can acknowledge that they are a part of us and that those feelings need to be listened to, not ignored. And when we do listen to them, we can learn how to accept ourselves more fully in that moment. Transformation comes when we can learn to make peace with those feelings that we have. It can be easy to feel more comfortable with the happy feelings, but if we're always waiting for the next shoe to drop, like lurking in the background is some fear that we've been trying to ignore, then we're also denying a part of ourselves. And forgiveness also means making peace with these feelings. With time and work, we can begin to learn how to acknowledge these feelings. And when we can learn how to face our painful emotions and feelings, we can learn how to better face the pain and emotions that others may also be feeling. Face it till you make it. When we face and accept even the most complex of emotions, it leads us to be able to hear someone else's complex emotions with a deeper sense of humility and honoring the space of vulnerability. Another book that explores the importance of forgiveness in the face of a painful time in history, which I mentioned a little bit earlier, is called The Book of Forgiving by Desmond Tutu. The book was rooted in the experience of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that worked to explore the process of forgiveness after the apartheid regime in South Africa was dismantled. When it comes to the subject of forgiveness, the fourfold path that this book outlines can be used by anyone in the process of learning what forgiveness means as a practice, not just as a theory. The insights in this book complement Colin Tipping's teachings and deepen our understanding of how forgiveness can be transformational. Now, the first step in the fourfold path is telling the story. Now, this involves expressing the pain that we have experienced. Tutu emphasizes the importance of sharing our stories, as it allows us to acknowledge our wounds and the impact that they have had on our lives. The book writes, "Forgiveness is not forgetting, it is remembering without pain." By articulating our experiences, we begin to confront the hurt and validate our emotions. It's important to reiterate that the process of learning how to accept our own emotions needs to be started first. As Colin Tipping has written, we cannot fully experience transformation until we accept our feelings and make peace with them. Going back to David Kessler, my grief and loss mentor, he said that before we can work on our guilt, we must work on our shame. From this perspective, this means that we must move beyond thinking we're a bad person or that they're a bad person. If we try and work on our guilt before we have accepted the feelings related to the shame, if the person we're trying to make amends with, for example, simply throws it back in our face, then the unprocessed shame may take us back out and try to crush us again. In the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, both the victims and the perpetrators had the opportunity to tell their stories. It was not a court. There was no one to judge them. These were people who, with a deep sense of vulnerability, allowed the wounding that they had done or the woundedness that they had experienced to be revealed. As family members of those living with substance or alcohol use disorders, this shows us the importance, as family members and those living with alcohol or substance use disorders, this shows us the importance of open and honest communication with vulnerability. When we have worked on ourselves to be able to risk trusting another person with the sacredness of our story, wounds, scars, fears, and all, telling our story takes trust and vulnerability. Now, the second step in this fourfold path is naming the hurt. We're encouraged to be honest about the pain that has been inflicted upon us. Naming our hurt is not an act of blame, but rather a way to confront the truth of our experiences. It helps to clarify the emotions that we feel and bring awareness and validation to the suffering that we have experienced. Again, naming our hurt is not an act of blame, but rather a way to confront the truth of our experiences. This is a sacred space of trust where we risk sharing how our actions or the actions of others have hurt us. For those who may be following a 12-step program, think of the fourth step, fearless moral inventory. There's a third section in it, the third column, which reads, what did the hurt, fear, or resentment affect? This actually validates your hurt. It gives credibility to the fact that even if you have to take accountability for whatever the resentment or the fear or the hurt is, depending on the circumstance, of course, it still has caused some pain or problem in your life. And this is what naming the hurt is ultimately about. It's about validation. That even if we have to take responsibility for our actions, we need to take responsibility for our actions. That my hurt, fear, or resentment still has a valid sense of an area in my life that it has directly impacted with me. So the next path in this fourfold path is granting forgiveness. Tutu reminds us that forgiveness is a choice, a conscious decision that we make to release the hold that anger and resentment have on our hearts. The book states forgiveness is not a once and done decision. It's a process. This step may require us to revisit that decision repeatedly, especially if old wounds resurface. It's essential to be patient with ourselves as we navigate this ongoing process. Going back to what Colin Tipping writes, forgiveness isn't an act of dispensation to which we grant someone, but instead it's an act for us to recognize that which we no longer want to keep tethering ourselves to, the hurt. The hurt which is a part of our lives. And it may come back in waves or ripples, but it does not need to define us. Now, the fourth point in the book of forgiveness speaks of renewing or releasing the relationship. This step acknowledges that forgiveness can lead to the restoration of relationships, but it can also mean letting go of toxic relationships. True forgiveness may result in reconciliation, healing, and deeper bonds. However, if relationships remain harmful, it's sometimes necessary to release them and move forward into a healthier direction. Ultimately, forgiveness is about healing, both for the forgiver and the forgiven. Tutu states, forgiveness is a gift we give to ourselves. This idea resonates with Tipping's statement that embracing forgiveness and embracing our genuine feelings liberates us from struggles with those feelings. When we forgive, we begin to heal our wounds and reclaim our peace. So as we reflect on the teachings of both Colin Tipping and Desmond and Mpo Tutu, we come to understand that forgiveness is indeed a journey of transformation. It requires courage to confront our pain, honesty to acknowledge our hurt, and the willingness to embrace empathy. So let us carry this message of forgiveness in our hearts. Let us strive to lighten the emotional burdens and build deeper connections with ourselves and others. In doing so, we not only heal ourselves, but also contribute to a more empathetic and united world. Amen.